Let's see, Carla. I've got Carla Grewe. She's here, and Patrick Holland and Jennifer Barker. Then Justin, Representative Justin Hicks will be here in just a few seconds, I hope. But Patrick, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and we'll introduce Jennifer and Carla, make introductions before we get started in the conversation.
Absolutely. Even before I start with that, I want to let you know that Ron just sent me a text back and he said, okay. So Ron Calzone may be joining us as well.
That'd be awesome.
Yes. Okay. And hello, everybody. My name is Pat Holland, and there's an organization that I head up called the Missouri Freedom Initiative. And we've been looking into the legislation that Jody's talking about tonight, 1165, at least a little bit, to the best of our ability. But we'll talk a little bit more about gold and silver tonight. Not that I want to talk to you about a bill that I'm supporting, but we have language within the bill basically to set up what legal tender is in the state of Missouri. So it would offer us some protections from the kind of stuff that we're looking at it in 1165. But at the same time, it's my opinion, and we'll get into this a little bit later, I think this bill just needs to be shut down.
And Jennifer, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. I'm Jennifer Ann Barker, and I am founder and director of Informed Health Choice Missouri and Informed Health Choice. We work with legislators and ran across 1165 because another freedom leader in South Dakota pointed it out to us that they had this legislation in their state and found that there were 20 states carrying it. And so right away, after I printed off the 103 pages of the bill, knew this was going to be the #1 top bill we wanted to pay attention to.
Well, I appreciate you for being here, Jen. I think as far as I know, you're the one in my circle of people that has the most information about the bill, and I appreciate you being willing to talk about it. It's been difficult to find legislators who want to talk about it, but we do have, I see Representative Justin Sparks. Thank you so much for being willing to even be here and talk about this, Justin. I really appreciate it. You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Good. Yeah. Representative Justin Sparks from the 110th district, which is like Wildwood, West St. Louis County area. And obviously very important topic. A lot of concerns that many of us share the very same concerns that you all are talking about. And frankly, we don't know enough about it. I don't know enough about this topic, period. That's why I'm diving into it. It kind of got sprung on me last second. I also did, I'm working on HB 1333 with it, which is a fiduciary responsibility ESG bill. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. Yeah, and I'll be happy to answer any questions I possibly can. What
Awesome.
We know anyway.
Thank you, Justin. And Carla, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm a concerned citizen and happened to meet with several of the committee representatives while I was in Jeff City last week. And yeah, I'm concerned. I don't want China here in Missouri.
Right. So I'm interested to see if you learned anything else in the meeting that you had this afternoon, but I appreciate you being here. I've texted Representative Copeland, haven't heard back from him yet. So the way that we'll do this is everybody can stay on mute if you don't mind. We're gonna have some discussion between Representative Sparks and the 3 or 4 of us who are discussing. If you can wait just a little bit, let us get through a good amount of discussion, maybe around 8:30, 8:40. We'll open it up for question and answers, or if we get to a spot where we're kind of finished discussing, then we'll open it up for Q&A. And if you have a question when it's time, just raise your hand, and then I'll recognize you and you can unmute. That'll keep everything running a little bit more smoothly. So Representative Sparks, tell us what you know about this bill.
So we're talking about the UCC code.
1165.
Correct. And if you guys don't know, this is a very strange, complicated, and weird, but basically we have a uniform code in the United States about buying and selling. And typically, from what I understand, we have updates that we have typically done before in the state legislature before I got here, as it was explained to me. Typically, this is not launched on the legislature at the last second. This is a very standard process that we go through of looking what we need to do with the other states to be on the same page, make sure we update the code at the same time. This is not how this happened this year. This came out of nowhere. And talking to my other legislators that have been in the legislature for some time now, they said, this is not typical. This is not how this usually goes, which immediately, started raising the red flags to a bunch of us. I actually learned about this by listening to Glenn Beck. And he brought up the fact that Missouri was one of the states that was entertaining a very similar bill that was going through the South Dakota legislature. So I immediately looked up who was filing it, and it's Justin Hicks. And I know Justin, he's a friend. So I immediately reached out to him, and I could tell that this bill did not originate with Justin. It was handed to Justin to file. And he immediately started, he didn't even know, he thought it was a simple update to the UCC code. He quickly realized it's, not. And so immediately started working on an amendment to remove all language dealing with electronic currency or anything that would be outside the purview of a classic UCC update. The bigger picture here, I think, is I still don't know who is the driving force behind this. Still don't know. Trying to figure it out. We all are. But it is a much bigger picture thing because this is happening in many states at the exact same time. And so we have to wonder, not to be like conspiratorial, but lots of big red flags. Some other legislators kind of came to me and said, this is not only is this all being done at the same time with concerns, particularly with digital currency, setting us up for a digital currency, but more importantly, I'm going to get rid of that, sorry. But why and what can we do about it? And these are big red flags because this is not the process that we typically go through. Now, that's what I understand. I hope that's not too long-winded. That's what I understand from the people that have already been in the legislature before I got here. This is not the typical fashion in which we approve UCC codes. That's very concerning to me. Can we make this bill good enough or completely benign? I don't know. That's what Justin's working on right now. I've been assured that that's what's going to happen, but frankly, already the process we've gotten here has already concerned me. It's already set me on a cynical path, that makes sense to you.
Right. Yeah. So Patrick or Jen or Carla, do you have anything to add or just comments to make?
I'll make a comment real quick. One thing that I've noticed in the bill is setting up basically a framework for contract law that is based on a digital currency. It seems like. So if you take out the digital currency, which my understanding is Justin Sparks has already done, the framework for the contract payments is still there for some kind of digital payment system. So, you almost have to take that out too. So that's one thing that I was concentrating on. But I will say that basically, when it comes to jurisdiction, I would like to know, and I asked Justin face-to-face in his office, who gave this to you? He says, a lot of people gave it to me. This is his exact words. I said, are a lot of people the Speaker of the House? And he says, a lot of people wanted me to do this. So I stopped asking at that point. I don't think he even really knows what's going on with this bill either. So I'm going to have to agree with the rep here on this. I don't think he truly knows. And I think he's nervous. So I don't know if it was the Chamber of Commerce or if it was Representative Blocker that gave it to him. I just don't know. But I will say the framework for contract payments and interstate commerce is worrying to me because the framework is still there based on the digital currency that you've been talking about, Jody. And by the way, I found out about this from Jennifer in Informed Health Choice of Missouri, and that was through Bill Eigle's office. And so if Jennifer hadn't put this on my radar, one of my guys looked at it, but he said it's a standard, contract here, that comes from the federal government and then comes down to the states. My understanding of the Constitution, it works the opposite way. The states come up with contracts for interstate commerce and trade. And then, basically it goes to the federal government to be, ratified, whatever. So it is interesting to me. It seems to be happening in reverse, but that's the best information I have from Justin Sparks. Or not Justin Sparks, I'm sorry, Justin Hicks.
We've got two Justins.
Yep, and I'm sorry about that. So, but at any rate, thank you, Jennifer, for putting it on my radar. And several of our people are looking into it too.
Yeah, thanks. Truly, thank you, Jen. You've got a team who does an amazing job combing through legislation, looking at the things that have been filed. That's one of the things I think is interesting about this bill is that it was filed really late. So, had we not had somebody on Jen's team, or maybe it was Jenn yourself, I don't know who first noticed it, but, because we're already engaged in the legislation, already moving around, sometimes we miss the things that are filed a little bit later. So Jenn does a phenomenal job. For those of you who don't know her, she has a team of people who are just fantastic. They work really hard. So Jennifer, tell us what you've learned. Tell us what you think.
Yes, thank you, Jody. So again, I was alerted about this legislation through, we have health freedom leaders throughout the entire nation that communicate together. And so the South Dakota leader had brought this to my attention that there were 20 states that were filing UCC Article 12 amendment, and look to see if your state is on here. And yes, Missouri was on there, showing that my representative Justin Hicks was carrying it. So of course we reached out to him to find out more information, because when I printed the bill off, it was 103 pages long. This bill is repealing 84 sections of statute and replacing those with 107 new sections. So there was a lot to learn, and we printed this bill out. One of our team members started to line by line, page by page, compare it to South Dakota's legislation, because we had found out that Kristi Noem had vetoed it in South Dakota, and it was eerily identical to our legislation. So further on, as I'm discovering what's going on here, I find out that this Uniform Commercial Code, it's a set of standards that facilitate and clarify the definitions used in interstate sales and commercial transactions, and that they do adopt articles from time to time. And that this article, though, is the largest that we've ever seen in the Missouri legislature. The last one, the largest next to that was 77 pages long. But the things that we started discovering in here is very alarming, because first of all, the definitions, first thing that we came to Justin Hicks with was, we're nervous about this talking about electronic money. We're nervous about the fact that it talks about biometrics as security procedures, which he tried to ease our nerves that this is the way that we use Apple Pay, and that when he wants to make a payment to his LA, or his LA wants to make a payment to him, their phones communicate. This is truing up, getting things in code, in uniform code, for us to be able to do that through different states. And he also talked about loans. When you are taking out like a home loan or a car loan and you default on that loan, if you paid with it with, say, cryptocurrency or an electronic currency, that they would need to know if there is more than just one person that loaned that money to them. How would you know lender A or lender B who would get first dibs? He said that this would help with establishing that electronically. So we kept researching it, and there's just, I can't even begin to tell you the definitions of money, electronic, person, security procedures, controllable account, controllable electronic record, controllable payment, and tangible. All of these are concerning definitions in the legislation. They did remove electronic money. It was listed, I believe, 36 or 38 times in the bill, which has been removed completely. But what we do find, which is listed 303 times, is the word control. So those three names, controllable account, electronic record, and controllable payment intangible, seem to be what we're using in place of electronic money. So do you want me to go through certain sections of the bill, Jody? And
I think you when you met with Representative Hicks, he told you certain things that he didn't think this bill was aimed at, but he did not deny that making sure that decentralized cryptocurrency would no longer be permissible, but that the central, even if it does not exist yet, it would not stop central bank digital currency. Is that, did I repeat you?
well, to an extent, yes. And the people that drafted this legislation, when we asked Hicks who wrote the legislation, he said there was a collaboration of us in the House. And when we asked, well, who in the House, it was just a collaboration in the House. What we do know is that the ULC drafted it. That's the Uniform Law Commission in Chicago. It was probably given to Plocker, and then Plocker put it into Hicks' lap. But the ULC, the gentleman there's one of them came to testify at the hearing. His name was Ben Orzensky. And so Ben Orzensky, Stephen Weiss, and Edwin Smith are drafters of the ULC CC code. And you can go on their website. They have recorded Zooms where you can listen in of them talking about the Article 12 and what it does and how they're amending Article 9. So it does what, and if you go on their Zoom call, they actually state that cryptocurrency and Bitcoin will not be recognized as money or a form of or medium of exchange, but that in fact CBDC will be. State that right on their website.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jennifer. In fact, the framework is there for all of this that you're talking about. Whether they take the actual term, digital currency or, electronic currency out, the framework remains. ESG and social credit scoring, digital wallets, all lie within this framework. Now, I'm not saying they're using this language, gang, but it's within the framework. It's all there. That's the scary part about this. That's the part that I've been looking into. And by the way, Jennifer has a lot more information about this than I do, but as opposed to rewriting something like this, what is everyone's feeling about maybe just looking at just stopping this and then looking at it again next year? Because they entered it so late, there's a lot of confusing stuff here. And this is a lawyer's bill. This was written by attorneys for attorneys. So the average layman isn't going to understand a whole lot of this, but it's just because we've been so, we're hypersensitive to ESG and social credit scoring in our organization. We're always looking for stuff that contains this in legislation. And here it is, right here. It's 1165. It's here, gang.
Representative Hicks, what do you think about just, it feels like a lot to me, just personally, it feels like a lot to make sure that everything is safe the way that it needs to be. Even if this is something that we want or don't want, feels like to me that it might be safer just to stop it. But what do you think?
Yeah, Representative Sparks, by the way. Justin and I get it, switched up all the time, but Justin filed the bill, but I'm Sparks, even though, yeah, the two Justins. So I don't think that's a bad idea, because what's the rush? Why should we rush into something that we're not 100% comfortable with, nor do we understand? It's just my own personal opinion here that our financial system being in the state that it's in, I believe that our Federal Reserve, our Treasury, our government as a whole is looking for a way to pivot, is looking for a way to reset, if you want to call it, our financial system. In the digital dollar is going to be pivotal, in my opinion now, and it is the opinion of others as well, that is going to be the pivotal piece in moving forward in the very near future. And I do not believe that it's a coincidence that we're dealing with these bills under the guise of a typical routine uniform code bill, and that people are waking up to it. I will say in its present course, I do not believe it's going to pass. And I've talked to Justin, obviously, several times about this. He tells me it has less than 0.05% chance of ever even moving forward. He does not anticipate it coming forward with his amendments, fixes, or changes or not. He does not anticipate this happening. And I don't either. But as it stands right now, I don't see it moving forward in its current state. That's just me.
It did pass through not your committee, but it did pass through the standing committee. The next step would be rules. So you feel like the general consensus is it won't make it to rules, even though we think that it was Plocker who handed us the bill?
Well, and again, I haven't spoken to the speaker about it. I don't know. I can't speculate on how it got here or why. But if it's getting out of the committee the way that it did, it caught everybody by surprise. I will tell you that. I didn't know it because I'm not on that committee. And the way that it works, and you guys know this on the House, if you're not on that committee, you have no idea what bills are coming forward, or unless somebody tells you, you know. And so we found out about it, started digging into it. I heard about it on Lindex. So then we started really diving into it and brought it up during caucus to the rest of the group. And that's when our concerns were made very apparent. Now it's in rules, you're right. In rules is a bit of a formality. So it can be scheduled on the floor. From rules, it has to be passed out of rules first, and then it would be scheduled for floor to be voted on the floor. I can't tell you what's going to happen. I can't tell you what the rules committee is going to do. I'm not on that rules committee. I don't know. I just, from my conversations with other representatives, there's a lot of hesitancy here, even with promised changes to the bill. And the general consensus is, if I'm not 100% comfortable with this, I can't vote for it. If I'm not 100% comfortable that a framework isn't being laid for a digital dollar for what it could be used for. I'm not even talking about what you're saying it's intended for, but if the framework is in the legislation, then it can be used for that. And that's a big problem. So as it stands right now, I don't anticipate it moving forward. But as we all know, strange things happen. Stranger things have happened. So yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea. Long answer to your short question.
So I did see somebody in the comments ask about the committee vote, and I just looked it up really quick so I could give it to you. This is Alex Riley's committee. It's general laws is the committee that it went through. There was 7 ayes or yeses, 4 noes, and 5 who voted present. Now present, if you are unaware, present means that they were there for the vote, but they just chose not to take a vote. You know, in this case, it could be they just didn't feel comfortable voting one way or the other.
Right.
I probably would have preferred in that case, they just go ahead and vote no, but at least they didn't, you know, give it a yes vote. If they had voted no, it would have been voted down. It wouldn't have moved on. So I would have preferred a no vote, but
Jody, can I chime in for just a minute? And I'm not sure if
Sure.
anyone else who's been through lots and lots of committee votes might have some insight on this, but it was very easy to tell who was voting yes, but when people were voting no, it was super clear Representative Copeland voted no.
Yes, correct.
A lot of them were very clear when they voted present. Then there were some that were so quiet I couldn't hear anything. But after all the people had been given an answer, then the clerk went back to people who had voted present, and many of them changed their vote to no. And that strikes me as, I don't know, but I'm thinking that they knew that there was a push to get this bill through, and they had agreed not to be the no that caused it not to pass. And so after they saw how many yeses there were, then they were like, okay, I want to change my vote now. I'm not positive, but I've never seen anyone do that before. I've seen one person change their vote before, and that was the chairperson, in order to keep control of the bill so that he could bring it right back. So these changes, it's definitely unusual, not saying unheard of, but.
Jen, did you have
Can I
something?
interject something?
Oh, hey, Ron. Yeah.
So Ron Calzone here. Generally, over the years, the General Laws Committee is the Speaker's special committee. If there's a bill that he wants to die, he sends it to the General Laws Committee. If there's a bill that he definitely wants to pass, he sends it to the General Laws Committee. And that's not saying that every bill that goes to that committee meets, one of those two criteria. But if the bill is moving, if it gets voted out of the General Laws Committee to the Rules Committee, it's not going to be one of the bills that he wants to die. So that's a very general statement. Over a broad period of time, there are exceptions, but I think that you have to assume that this bill is moving.
So here's the vote. I just looked it up in the journal. So the journal is the official copy of the vote. If you're ever looking for votes, you need to make sure that you're looking at the journal. The ayes were Ealy, Hicks, Ingle, Justus, McMullen, Myers, and Riley. And Justin, you'll be able to help me. I know Ingle's a Democrat. Riley is Alex, he's a Republican. Hicks is Justin, he's a Republican. But I don't know Ealy. Who's Ealy?
What's his name again? Full name?
Ealy. The journal
Democrat.
didn't say.
That's not, is he a Democrat maybe? Because he doesn't sound, I would know him, I think,
I
if it
think
was
he-
a Republican. Yeah.
And then McMullen, is McMullen the guy with the mustache?
Mhm.
So he's a Republican.
Is that
Um,
Aaron?
Some say it's
McMullen?
Republican in name only.
Yeah, I've heard. You're talking about the
Um,
big, the
Yes,
twirly
Aaron
mustache guy?
McMullen, yes.
Yeah. And then we had no's were Ben Baker, Ron Copeland, Crossley. I don't know Crossley, and then Brad Hudson. Those four were no's.
Okay,
And
so that's very interesting. Because I typically vote with Brad and Ben on everything.
Mhm.
Just as a general, like not everything, like you know what I mean? It's just like we usually line up typically.
Right.
Did either one of them speak why they voted no?
I haven't watched the hearing.
Okay. It'd be very interesting because typically if you're voting against your chairman, you're gonna have some kind of conversation as to why, certainly, especially if a Republican's bringing a bill to a committee and trying to get it through and you're going to vote against it. That would be very telling. And you said Copeland voted no as well.
Copeland voted no, and I was hoping he'd be on tonight. But I don't think he made it.
Or only no at first.
Jody.
Because like Carla had mentioned, they first went through and voted, and Baker was present, Copeland was a no, and our only no. Hudson was present, and then when the clerk called again on them, Baker voted no, and Crossley voted no,
Okay.
and Hudson voted no. So
Okay.
3 of them flipped from present to no. And I don't know, I've never seen that happen before, and I don't know why that happened. It was very odd.
Sure.
Well, I could see them, like Justin said, not being, being nervous about voting against this, the chair. But then we did have 5
It
who
is,
remained as
it's just
present.
one of those, just to explain that, guys, it's one of those things that if you don't know about a bill, and especially like a uniform commercial code bill, like I wouldn't know anything about that if I'm not a lawyer, don't have any background in that. And you don't know, and it's brought to committee, you have a couple of witnesses, maybe for or against, and you read the bill, but you guys know it's 103 pages long. That is a lot to read when you've got a lot of other things that you're doing too, other bills you're working on. And you're trying to trust what people tell you and say,
Right.
well, this is a typical update, you know. But again, if you're not comfortable, and that's why, I mean, without speaking to those gentlemen, it'd be a very interesting conversation to have, or whatever their testimony was, why they voted no.
And then the 5 who kept their present vote was Lovasco, Matthieson or Matthieson.
Yeah, it's Matthieson. It's Matthieson.
Parker, Reuter, and Weber. So, you know, if we could have had some of those presents vote no, it wouldn't have passed, but their present votes don't count in either category. So it did pass, although like I said, I just looked it up again. It has not been referred to rules.
Okay.
And it went through committee on the 22nd, which is 4 days ago. So the middle of last week, Wednesday, maybe. So
So the speaker has not referred it to rules yet.
not yet.
Okay.
So I would think that if he was, you know, you just never know what the strategy is there, but does any of our guests have anything else to say about 1165?
Well, I'd like to say something really quick, if you
Sure,
don't mind. Now, 1165 is a complicated bill, and it deals with, you know, basically interstate contract law. And it did have language in there for digital currency. I mean, whether they want to talk about this or not, or admit that it was a digital dollar or not, it doesn't matter. The language was there. So let me tell you about the language in another bill. And I'm not here to sell another bill to you guys, but SB 100, I know a lot of you know about it, the silver and gold bill.
Patrick, let's do some question and answer on 1165 before we go to 100.
Oh, no, I was just going to talk about the amendment to basically to address legal tender in the state of Missouri that actually happened to be attached to SB 100.
Bratton's amendment.
Correct.
This is Jermaine. This is Jermaine. Let Patrick go on.
Okay.
Okay, so the bill, you know, itself, you know, it makes gold and silver legal tender in the state of Missouri, but Bratton did something very interesting during the Senate hearing. He put on an amendment to actually define basically what would be legal tender in the state of Missouri. And in putting on there that, you know, gold and silver are legal tender, but also that the state of Missouri cannot mandate a digital currency for use of payments of taxes or services with the state of Missouri. We actually have protection now with that, well, protection inside another bill to make sure that the state of Missouri cannot mandate a digital dollar on us. So this is actually a critical thing here. So just so everyone knows that there is another bill moving through the system right now that does protect Missourians from the digital dollar. Now, it's not.
I'm sorry for interrupting you. Do you know if there's a House bill that's accompanying that? I'd be very interested.
Well, actually, SB 100 is going to be handled by Dirk Deaton. There is another bill in the House, but it's not already been through the fire in the Senate. SB 100 is our best bet to get it through.
Right. No, that's perfectly fine. I just wanted to know, is there a concurrent effort in the House?
Yeah, Representative Davis did an exact copy of SB 100.
Perfect. Thank you.
You bet. So
can I pile on that, Patrick?
Absolutely. Go ahead, John.
Okay, so I think what we're finding out is that this is a very complex issue, and we're all afraid of this 105-page bill that nobody seems to really quite understand, and so I think that's a pretty good indication. And the threat is real. You know, we know that there are people that want to take us to central digital currency. They want to be able to track everything, as has been mentioned. It seems to me that the right approach to this is not to play whack-a-mole with bills like this that come up, but put in place some positive legislation that provides protection. So you understand there's a difference between stopping bad stuff and passing a law that prevents the bad stuff from coming on. And I think what the things in Senate Bill 100 are a great start. But I want to plant this seed. If, and Patrick and I have talked about this at length, if Missouri had its own currency, and that currency was hard, sink your teeth into currency, not just digital currency, and if other states followed suit, that would thwart their ability to move us to totally digital currency. If you notice, the U.S. Constitution provides for states coining their own coining their own silver and gold currency. And so that can be done with modern technology. It can be done in a foldable format. So you don't have hard coins. It could be foldable paper, laminated gold and silver. And I would suggest that that's something for us to be working toward. And Senate Bill 100 is more than just the camel's nose under the tent. It's the beginning of that process.
Great, thanks, Ron. Okay, does anybody, it's 8:40. Does anybody have any questions? If you do, just find your button to raise a hand.
Jennifer, could you confirm one more thing that I think you got further along in the bill substitute than I did, but in listening to the executive session and the vote, I could have sworn that the bill sponsor said every reference to digital currency and electronic money was taken out from the bill, and that this substitute that was just provided right then, so no one had a chance to read it, was 96 pages long. But in reality, it's 102 pages long, so it's only 1 page smaller than the bill started. And I thought you said that while at the very beginning it looked like the definition of money had reverted back to the way it used to be, that you found it in 2 other places, and the furthest into it in terms of depth of pages had all the identical language that the bill sponsor said was taken out. Is that right?
So what I found is that on page 4, it had the definition of money. And the way that it defined it, it basically was, it wasn't basic at all. It's extremely confusing. But the way that it was determined by 2 different attorneys is that anything that was considered money prior to the government adopting the Article 12 would not be considered money. And that in the committee substitute, that very confusing sentence was removed off of page 4, but it was added to the definition of controllable electronic record on page 93. So it's changed. It was defining money. Now it's defining controllable electronic record. So instead of having electronic money listed, I think it was 36 times in the original bill, and it's not listed 1 time in the committee substitute, but it looks as if we've replaced it with controllable electronic record.
That's part of the framework I was talking about earlier.
Mhm.
It's still part of the framework for a digital payment system, even though they don't define a digital dollar. It's not stated in there as a digital dollar. The framework is still there. It's like building a highway, but not having the cars to run on it yet.
And another thing that was extremely alarming in this, when we see the definition of person means an individual, corporation, business, trust, estate, trust, partnership, limited liability company, association, joint venture, governmental, the subdivision, agency, or instrumentality, or any other legal or commercial entity. So then when you see person listed anywhere in this, it could be referring to a corporation, to the government, anybody.
Rich, do you have something, a question? You want to unmute yourself?
Sure.
Can you hear me okay?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Actually, Ron is in my district. And I wanted to let you know that I spoke with Ron, and I read the entire bill over and over, trying to make sense out of it. It's very confusing, just like everybody says. I also brought it up to my central committee, and that's covers about half of Ron's area. So I spoke with Ron. He said it, as he understood it, it was to, cover electronic commerce between the states and that, and, I let him know that it's more than just that. Actually, I was able to send him some information from Tom Renz's blog about it, and I got a feeling him being informed is hopefully why he did a great job of saying no during his committee. Hats off to Ron. He's been a great representative to me. But I also wanted to ask Justin Sparks. You mentioned the digital dollar. Where are you at on the dollar as far as being for or against it?
I'm completely against it. It's a terrible idea.
That's great.
A digital dollar would enable control over what you buy, what you sell, carbon tax. You can't buy money, you can't use your money. And if they wanted to stimulate the economy, they would say your money's going to expire in 2 weeks. It's an insanely bad idea. In my
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks,
Sure.
Rich. Thanks for sharing what Ron had said. I was hoping he'd be on with us this evening, but I appreciate you sharing that. Paul, did you have a question?
I had a comment like everybody else. I heard about this from a friend who sent me information from going back. I heard there were 12 states, but I heard someone else there were 20. I had hoped to get to the meeting on Tuesday. I didn't, but I put in the comments a letter I wrote to every member of the committee that day. Because there were two things I wanted to remind them of. One is that I asked two questions. One, isn't the Constitution of the United States still the supreme law of the land? Secondly, doesn't it prohibit the states from using anything but gold and silver coin as a currency for the payment of debt? And the third question I asked them is, do you not understand that you could subject yourself to Section 3, Article 50, Article 3, Section 15 of the Missouri Constitution, which says if you violate your oath, you're subject to removal from office. So that was a concern to me because of my, I consider this kind of a legislative emergency because there are so many states doing this. And I'm reaching out to my contacts in other states to share this information. Because if I understand correctly, so Joe Biden signed this executive order last year, and I wondered, how is he going to implement that? Well, the way he's going to implement that is he's going to get the states to do it individually. You get so many states to do this, like maybe 30 or 38 states, like what you need to for an amendment to the Constitution, then we've got problems. And if you got people in other states, then if you have contacts in other states, my recommendation is to tell them you got a legislative emergency to deal with this issue. That's what I had.
Paul, that was brilliant. I guess we could refer to that as, basically the poor man's ratification of the states. So I love the way you brought that up. Thank you. And yes, it is a legislative emergency in my opinion too.
So, anybody else have a question?
I had one more thing I wanted to mention. Based on, so I was in a meeting with a bunch of freshman female legislators, and one of them made a point of saying that leadership wants this through. And so I think it's fair to say we have to assume that is the goal. And when we had this relatively small number of legislators that we were trying to speak to about the problems here, it was difficult. Well, obviously we didn't stop it, right? So it'll be even harder with 164 of them, I guess. But the idea that they will vote on things that they haven't read, what about instead of go ahead and pass it, how about suggest that there's a committee put together to research it so that people really have time to understand it instead. So they're not going to want to vote no because they're being told to vote yes. But what about put together a study group or a special committee or a task force or something like that so that it could really be delved into? Because it seems like if we don't pass it, everything's working just fine right now anyway. Then we'd have time and every rep could understand it before they are asked to vote yes on something that could change our world, really.
I think that's a good idea. Try to give them kicking the can down the road as an option. An incentive for that might be if we can find a handful of senators that tell them it's DOA over here anyway. We don't want the House to pass it, but if they know, if the message is that it's absolutely DOA, it's not going to make it through the session, nobody understands it, then that might give them incentive to do exactly what you're saying and at least not pass it this year.
It'd be nice it'd be nice if SB 100 could pass first anyway. For safeguards of not mandating a digital dollar before we even look at the uniform code would be very helpful.
Yeah, it's actually one more interesting thing about it too, is that it says what legal currency is in the state of Missouri in SB 100 with Bratton's amendment. It is the dollar and gold and silver.
Yeah,
that's it. It doesn't include a digital dollar. It doesn't include Bitcoin, nothing else. The dollar, gold and silver. So I like that.
Awesome. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions?
Hey, Jody, it's Melissa.
Hey,
I
Melissa.
can't figure out how to raise my hand.
It's
So,
okay.
I guess my only concern is I think all of us here are saying, except not saying, that this is bad. This is a road to a bad place for our state and for our country. And my only concern to kicking it down the road is either we'll have fewer conservatives or the evil side will have more evil and more money to push it through. So I hesitate. Why can't we just kill it now and let it be dead?
Well, I think I can answer a little bit of this. From what it's been relayed to me is that we have to do something. Updates to the UC code do happen, and they are necessary because of, as I understand it, without it, certain things can inhibit interstate commerce, and Missourians end up suffering because of it. And so the UC code has to be updated. That's why all the states get together, the commission with all the states, they get together and they try to come up with something that everybody agrees on so that interstate commerce can continue to flow equitably. That's how it's been explained to me. That helps.
Well, yeah, that
Well, the
does,
question,
but this doesn't have anything to do with UC code, and we all know that. I mean, Florida has vetoed it. South Dakota has vetoed it. A half a dozen other states. So if we need to deal with UC code, let's deal with that. But this is
No,
not
I agree.
that.
Yeah, definitely. I 100% agree with you. That's been the argument that's being sold to the representatives is
Yeah.
that, no, this is something that
Well,
we have to do. Yeah.
right, and it very well might be that it has to be done at some time, but
Sure.
I kind of doubt that the sky
like
will
this.
fall if it doesn't happen this year, right?
Yeah.
And, they overplayed their hand. They are threatening us with a central bank digital currency. And so it's natural that the states are going to be more leery. And so, don't forget Real ID. So the deadline for Real ID was supposed to be like 10 years ago. The sky was supposed to fall 10 years ago. And, they keep pushing the deadline back. So, don't let them bluff us into thinking that the sky will fall if we don't do something now. And once
Correct.
again, they overplayed their hand. They're the ones that created this problem.
Jen?
So, and by the way, to the earlier comment about kicking it down the road, kicking it down the road, as was suggested, is killing it this year. That is killing it. That's making, if it doesn't pass, then it's dead for this year. So if they can be convinced that it's not killing it forever, then it's easy to kill it this year. And then there's time for everybody to learn more about it.
Right. Jen, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, well, I wanted to mention that the ULC, the Uniform Law Commission, is a third party, and that this is optional. It isn't something that has to be done. And that Louisiana never adopted Article 2. Now, when I brought that up to Representative Hicks, he told me that they have French code or something to that effect, and that's why they never adopted Article 2. But I don't see an issue with kicking it down the road for sure, because of South Dakota vetoing it. DeSantis has said if it came across his desk, UCC codes would be vetoed. But can I share my screen real quick to show you this ULC site?
Sure. Yeah. Let me see if, do you have an option to do that, or do I need to?
I think I have the option here.
Okay.
Can
We see
everybody
it.
see that?
Yep.
So the states that are in green are all of the states that have legislation going through their legislature right now for UCC amendments. The blue state, North Dakota, they have not enacted it, but they're doing a summer study. So there aren't any states that have adopted this yet. And I don't believe that Missouri should be the first. So I see no problem with saying we need to do a summer study, kick this down the road. And that summer study, I think, is a brilliant idea that we bring in, because this bill doesn't just talk about banking. It brings in farming. It brings in lots of other industries that we need to have specialists discussing this and to figure out what it actually would do and what the ramifications could be.
Agreed.
Yeah. I like that. That's an awesome,
Great idea.
well, Jen, thanks for sharing.
Thank you for the graphic too.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah,
get
I
all
think
the
that's a
information
great, I
on
would
the
agree
site.
with that.
Does anybody else have any questions? We're coming up on 9 o'clock, and I don't want to keep you too much later. Unless we have, I don't want to hang up if you have questions. I just don't want to keep you.
Jody, thank you so much for putting this together. I appreciate you and everybody else's time, concern.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're very welcome.
Hey, Ron Sanders here.
Oh, hey, Ron.
Hey, what could the central committees do to help across the counties?
Good question. I know that central committees have been writing resolutions and submitting on different bills. So I think that if, you could get a consensus among your committee to do that, that would be a great thing. And I really do believe that has been helpful in showing our legislators with really a variety. I've seen it now with a few different things this session, and it does really seem to be helpful. So I would think that that would be something that you could do is if you could get a resolution together, that would be a great thing to do. And then of course, just, doing the work of reaching out, having the conversations with your legislators and that sort of thing. Justin, do you have any other comments about what the committees could do to be helpful?
No, I second those opinions in completely 100%. It's very encouraging to me that the groundswell of support from you all, you guys are so important to us in that we can identify a problem, target a solution, get the word out, motivate in a way that's very effective. Because in my conversations with other legislators, this is what we rely on. it's unbelievable how sneaky some of this stuff is. And when you kind of dive into it, you're like, 103-page bill, digital currency. What in the world are we doing? Like, how in the world did this pass out of committee? You know, that's kind of because we rely on the committees to vet these things before they can even get out. And so, yeah, we have to get the word out. We have to be vigilant, and we can't take anything for granted, especially right now.
Right. I agree. Rich, did you have something you wanted to say? See your hand up.
Yeah, I had just one more thing to say. I know we want to concentrate on the topic at hand, but I was in a few Lincoln days over the past few days, and I think we're losing a little traction on CMR with the and I just wanted to put a word out there and hope that we can revisit those with the people in our legislature in the legislature and give another push on that.
Yeah,
what do you
absolutely.
Yeah.
Concurrent CMR, for those of you who don't know, is concurrent majority ratification. It's the process by which we ratify amendments to our state constitution. And we've got Ron here. Ron, are you still with us?
Yes,
I am. Yes, I can give a report on that.
Yeah, can you
That's
share?
for Ron Calzone.
Ron Calzone, yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
Can you
Okay,
share?
actually, I think that CMR is not going anywhere in the House. Am I still with you? I heard a bell.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Okay, CMR is not going anywhere in the House because HJR 43 has already gone to the Senate. It looks like it's actually going to be the vehicle for CMR. And as we talk to senators, it looks like CMR is the consensus choice. And so we fully expect HJR 43 to be converted from Article 3 to Article 12, and it'll go from a change in the percentage to CMR. Now, what's at question is whether the CMR will be based on congressional districts or House districts. And there has been a time when it sure looked like the congressional districts is what was favored. Now, either one of those would be a big improvement and it would be a good thing. But my opinion, especially from a grassroots perspective, is that House districts is immensely better than congressional districts. And so that's our push right now to convince people to go that way. Now, why do I say House districts are better? If you look back at ballot measures that we've lost, that our side, quote unquote, has lost in the last several years, typically there has been no real response. There's been no real effort to stop anything. And that's because it's really, really expensive and really hard to run a statewide campaign. The same is somewhat true when you're talking about a campaign based on a whole congressional district. You pretty much have to use media, broadcast media, TV and radio, and it gets expensive and it takes a lot of planning and it's just higher level stuff than we've been able to do. If you use House districts, however, you could target the districts that look like they're the swing districts. If you use House districts, you can make use of lower levels of technology. You can make use of boots on the ground. You can do the stuff that the grassroots has always done so well. And so I think it would be cheaper and easier to fight bad ballot measures with House districts than it would congressional districts. That's the pitch. And also in principle, House districts it gives more voice to more people across the state, especially in rural areas.
So have you talked to the senators, Ron, about like how are they? Do you have a good read on how they feel about that? Are they still leaning toward
Yes,
Congress?
So for instance, Senator Koenig was, pretty solidly for congressional districts just a week or two ago. And I talked to him, oh boy, might have been Thursday last week. And, talking about these very things. And he said, well, I could go either way. And so he moved from solidly wanting congressional districts to saying either one is okay with him. Same thing with Senator Trent. I think Senator O'Loughlin likes the idea of giving the rural folks more voice. I think, I haven't really nailed down Ingle, but I think Ingle, even from last year, he was he liked the idea of House districts. So we need to continue talking to all of them. The HJR 43 is going to be handled by Senator Crawford, Sandy Crawford. And, of course, Jill Carter has the Senate version of CMR using House districts. So she's been the one that's been going around pushing it. And she's been trying to get with Sandy to talk to her about exactly how she feels about it. And it's just been hard to connect. So I think she's planning on doing that even tomorrow.
Are there any planned amendments, Ron, from any of the senators right now?
Well, yes, so I think that there is a Senate substitute. Now, understand this, HJR 43 is framed around Article 3 of the Missouri Constitution, and it only deals with measures that are proposed by the legislature or by petition, not a constitutional convention. And so in order to deal with all three ways you might change the Constitution, you need to move it into Article 12. And so I know there's been a Senate substitute drafted that does that. So it would use concurrent majority ratification with House districts, and it would apply to all three different ways you can amend the Constitution.
Great, thanks, Ron. So before we hop,
Can I say something real quick?
sure.
I talked to Senator. I talked to Senator Esslinger, and I know she's not on the committee that's going to deal with this. She was more thinking that it's going to be congressional districts. I talked to a few representatives, and they're thinking it's congressional districts. Not to say that they think it's a good idea with the legislative districts, which I am very much in support of. I'm just saying that we need to be vigilant and, be heard on this. And Justin Sparks, I'd like to know what your views are on this.
When I heard, I'm good with either one, honestly. Somebody I was trying, as we were remembering this conversation, trying to remember the argument for congressional districts versus the House. Somebody had made the argument that it makes it a stronger, we would have to lose how many congressional districts in order to get something passed. They were making the argument that congressional districts were stronger in some way. But I agree with you. I think the House districts actually are a better representation in general. So I'm good with either one. It's positives and negatives, I think, from both sides.
And you're kind of going through the same evolution of thought that I think a lot of people I've talked to are. Ultimately, they're okay with either one. I think that at first blush, you do the math, and right now Republicans hold 6 of the 8 congressional districts.
Right.
And and that's a higher percentage than 110 out of 163 is. And so
Right. Exactly.
sounds like it's right. That sounds like it's better. But you have to look at how much urban influence you have on some of the congressional districts, like CD3, where I'm at right now.
Right.
And CD3 is kind of one of the toss-up districts, but with the new map, there's more urban influence than ever in CD3. I think I think the principle is important, and you touched on that. It's just better representation using the smaller, smaller granulation. Somebody called it. I think it's a good term for it. But I think what's really, really, really important to look at is how we would actually fight a bad ballot measure. How does it happen? And again, we don't seem to be able to raise money to fight bad ones. And so we need to figure out how we can mobilize, smaller units, smaller squads of soldiers, to fight these kind of things. And I think that's one of the things you do with legislative districts.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone. It's 10 after 9. I don't want to keep you any longer. I really appreciate you being here. If you guys will make sure that you check out my website, it's jodygrace.com. Be sure that you subscribe to the blog, because as things move forward, I'll be talking with Ron this week. Definitely be keeping in touch with Jennifer. We'll be watching 1165, and I'll be if we need to have an action alert, where we have a specific action that we can all be taking, I'll be sure and update the blog there. Of course, Ron's got a great system for alerting people, and Jennifer does as well. But just make sure that you're plugged into someone somewhere who has the information and is helping to coordinate the response. We'll probably just need to wait on 1165 to see when it does get referred to rules. And when that happens, then we'll have a committee of legislators that we can target with a message. And then as things progress in the Senate with 43 on concurrent majority, Ron will be able to help us identify the actions that would be best suited for whatever's happening at the time. So, of course, I think that always reaching out to your legislator and letting them know how you feel is always a great thing. And if you are on a committee, central committee, and they have, you can get a majority to agree to write a resolution, I think that's very helpful as well. But if nobody else has any more questions, I'm going to let you guys go. It's getting a little bit late. I've got kiddos to get ready for school in the morning. So
I do too.
thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Justin, for being here. I really appreciate you more than I can say. Thanks, Jen and Patrick and Carla and Ron. I really appreciate you guys.
Thank you,
Thank
Jenny.
Jody, you're awesome.
Appreciate you.
Hi, guys.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.